The sky above Earth burned. Commander Jin-Ho Park gripped the command rail of the TSS Resolve's bridge as another orbital defense platform erupted into flames. The massive Zorgon warships moved with terrifying purpose, their strange angular hulls absorbing Earth's most powerful weapons like they were nothing more than raindrops. "Status report," Park demanded, his voice steadier than he felt. "Shoal defense grid is gone, sir," Lieutenant Min reported, her fingers flying across the tactical display. "Tokyo platform just went dark. Beijing station reports critical failures in all systems." Park watched the main view screen as a Zorgon dreadnought, easily 5 times the size of the largest human vessel, fired its main weapon. A beam of sickly green energy lanced through 3 orbital platforms in succession. "They're not even trying to communicate," whispered Navigation Officer Yun. "They just started shooting." The bridge fell silent as the reality sank in. Humanity's first contact with alien life, and it had immediately turned into a slaughter. The Resolve shuddered as a nearby explosion washed over their shields. Unlike the other vessels in Earth's defense fleet, the Resolve was special. An experimental warship with technology that even most of Earth's military leaders didn't fully understand. Its adaptive shield system was the only reason they were still alive. "Commander, incoming transmission from Admiral Lee," Communications Officer Sung announced. The Admiral's face appeared on screen, smoke filling the background. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead. "Park, it's over. Earth Command is compromised. I'm ordering all remaining vessels to implement Protocol Omega." Park felt his stomach drop. "Protocol Omega. Retreat and regroup. Abandon Earth." "Sir, we can't just." "That's an order, Commander. The Resolve is the only ship with technology that might stand a chance against these monsters. You need to survive. Gather what forces you can and find a way to fight back." The transmission crackled with static. "I'm promoting you to captain, effective immediately. The fate of humanity rests with you now. Lee out." The screen went dark. Park stood frozen, the weight of command suddenly heavier than anything he had ever felt. "Sir," Tactical Officer Jun's voice cut through Park's thoughts. 3 Zorgon vessels changing course. They're heading straight for us." Park looked around the bridge at his crew, all young, all terrified, all looking to him for leadership. He made the hardest decision of his life. "Helm, plot an escape vector. Maximum burn once we clear the debris field." "Sir." Helm Officer Su looked up in shock. "We're leaving. We can't win this battle," Park said, his voice low but firm. "Not here. Not now." The bridge crew exchanged glances of disbelief and despair. "Listen to me," Park continued. "This isn't surrender. This is survival. The Resolve is the only ship with systems the Zorgons haven't encountered before. We need to preserve this advantage." As if to emphasize his point, the view screen showed another Earth vessel, the Dauntless, exploding under Zorgon fire. "Helm, execute escape plan. Weapons, give us covering fire. Communications, broadcast to any surviving Earth vessels to rendezvous at Emergency Point Delta." The crew snapped into action. The Resolve turned away from Earth, its experimental engines glowing with blue-white energy. "Captain," Science Officer Hannah called out, her voice breaking. "I'm reading massive energy buildup from the Zorgon fleet. They're targeting major population centers on the surface." Park closed his eyes briefly. There was nothing they could do. "Stay on course," he ordered, his heart breaking. The Resolve accelerated away as behind them, Earth burned. The experimental ship's sensors recorded everything. The methodical destruction, the millions of lives lost with each Zorgon attack. Data that would fuel humanity's rage and determination in the dark days to come. As they reached the edge of the solar system, Park finally left the bridge. In his quarters, he stared at his reflection. Captain Park. The title felt hollow. He had left Earth to die. A soft chime announced a visitor. Engineering Chief Jun entered without waiting for permission, his uniform stained with coolant fluid. "The experimental drive held up," Jun reported. "We've successfully evaded pursuit, but I need to know what you plan to do next, Captain." Park looked up. "We're going to gather every surviving human ship. We're going to study the enemy. And then we're going to make them regret ever coming to Earth." Jun nodded slowly. "The crew is scared. Some think we should have stayed and fought, and died uselessly." Park shook his head. "We can't win with direct confrontation. Not yet, but the Resolve has technology the Zorgons haven't seen before. We need to understand their weaknesses. And then we build a resistance," Park said, determination hardening his voice. "Today was first contact, but it won't be the last contact." The two men stood in silence as the Resolve pushed deeper into space, carrying the hopes of a devastated planet. Outside Park's viewport, the stars stretched endlessly. Somewhere among them, the answers they would need to save what remained of humanity. Captain Jinho Park made a silent vow as he stared into that vast darkness. The Resolve would become more than just a ship. It would become the spark that would ignite humanity's fight back. It would become hope. The Resolve dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a shudder that ran through the entire ship. Captain Jinho Park steadied himself against his command chair, waiting for the sensors to stabilize. The bridge crew worked in tense silence, each person dreading what they might find at this latest human outpost. "Scanning the Vega colony now, Captain," said Lieutenant Da, his fingers dancing across the sensor controls. The pause that followed lasted only seconds but felt much longer. "3 more colonial outposts gone," reported Communications Officer Hae-Yun Kim, her voice tight with exhaustion. "No response to any transmissions. The settlement patterns match what we saw at Proxima and Wolf 359. Captain Park nodded grimly. The Zorgons were nothing if not consistent. They left no survivors, only empty buildings and an eerie silence. This was the 4th colony they had found this way in 2 weeks. "Any signs of Zorgon presence in the system?" Park asked. "Negative, Captain. They've moved on." Park rose from his chair and approached the main view screen. The peaceful-looking planet below gave no hint of the tragedy that had unfolded on its surface. 2 months since Earth's fall, and the Zorgons were methodically hunting down every human settlement. "How many colonies remain unaccounted for?" he asked. Officer Kim consulted her datapad. 7 major colonies and possibly 12 smaller outposts, if they manage to maintain calm silence after the initial attack. "Plot a course to Europa Station," Park ordered. "It's the closest potential survivor point." As the bridge crew prepared for the next jump, Park retreated to his ready room. The wall display showed their journey so far, a zigzag pattern across known space as they searched for remaining human forces. The Resolve had found 3 intact colonies and several damaged military vessels. Not enough for a real fight, but a start. His door chimed, and Chief Engineer Dr. Tadawon Lee entered without waiting for permission. The scientist's eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep, but they sparkled with barely contained excitement. "Captain, I've made a breakthrough with the phase shift technology," Lee announced, placing a small device on Park's desk. "The Zorgon sensors rely on quantum lock detection patterns. With this modification, we can appear invisible to them for short periods." Park picked up the device. It looked unremarkable. Just a small metal box with blinking lights. How short is short? 17 minutes at full power, Lee admitted, but that's enough time to slip past a blockade or escape detection. "Can we adapt it to the other ships we've gathered?" Lee shook his head. "Not yet. It requires the Resolve's specialized power core. But I'm working on a simplified version." In engineering, Dr. Lee worked feverishly on the ship's experimental systems, convinced they held the key to fighting back against overwhelming odds. His team had been working nonstop since Earth fell, pushing the experimental technology beyond its designed limits. Park's communicator beeped. "Captain to the bridge," came Officer Kim's urgent voice. When Park arrived, Kim was hunched over her station. "Sir, I'm picking up a distress signal. It's faint, but it's definitely using Alliance military encryption. Location: the Arcturus mining belt. It's repeating on a loop." Park studied the tactical display. Arcturus was a detour from their planned route, but they couldn't ignore potential survivors. "Could be a trap," Security Chief Jun warned. "Yes," Park agreed. "But if it's not, those people need our help." Helm, set course for Arcturus, maximum stealth approach. The Resolve altered course, slipping through space like a ghost. When they reached the mining belt, they found a grim sight: the remains of a battle. Destroyed ships, both human and Zorgon, floated among the asteroids. "Life signs detected," announced Science Officer Yuna, reading 27 human signatures hiding in the main mining facility. Before Park could respond, tactical alarms blared. "Zorgon patrol ship entering the system." Tactical Officer One's fingers flew across his console. "They haven't detected us yet." Park made a split-second decision. Activate Dr. Lee's phase shift technology. Get a rescue team to the shuttle bay. We have 17 minutes to get those people out. The rescue operation was tense but successful. The survivors, mostly military personnel from a destroyed cruiser, were stunned to see the Resolve materialize seemingly from nowhere to save them. As they escaped the system, just as the phase shift device failed, the Resolve added more strength to its growing fleet of survivors. Among the rescued was Commander G, a tactical genius who had managed to destroy 2 Zorgon vessels before his ship was crippled. "The Zorgons have a weakness," G told Park during their debriefing. "Their ships lose coordination when separated from their command vessels. If we could identify and target those." For the first time in weeks, Park felt a flicker of real hope. With each survivor they found, with each piece of intelligence they gathered, they were building towards something the Zorgons wouldn't expect: a resistance that could fight back. As the Resolve continued its dangerous mission to unite Earth's scattered forces, the ship became more than just a vessel. It became the heart of humanity's refusal to surrender, and in its engineering section, Dr. Lee's breakthrough was just the beginning of turning the experimental warship into something the Zorgons would learn to fear. The fleet of 14 ships hung in the darkness of space, their running lights dimmed to avoid detection. At the center of the formation, the TSS Resolve looked almost predatory, its experimental hull design unlike any other human vessel. Captain Jin-Ho Park stood on the bridge, studying the tactical display where a massive Zorgon installation orbited Proxima Centauri. "Proxima Station," Park said quietly. "Our first major strike against the Zorgons." He looked around at his bridge crew, seeing determination mixed with fear on their faces. 4 months of running, hiding, and gathering forces had led to this moment. "All ships report ready, Captain," Communications Officer Hae-Hyun Kim reported. "Commander Jai has positioned the flanking vessels as planned." Park nodded. The intelligence they had gathered suggested this station served as a forward base for Zorgon operations, coordinating their methodical destruction of human colonies. If they could damage it, they might buy time for the remaining outposts. "Begin approach," Park ordered. "Maintain communications blackout. Dr. Lee, is the phase shift technology ready?" From engineering, Dr. Lee's voice came through. "Ready, Captain. All ships are equipped with the modified version. It will give us 3 minutes of sensor invisibility. No more. That's all we need to get into position." Park turned to his weapons officer. "Ji-Hai, are you ready?" Weapons Specialist Ji-Hai Kang nodded, her hand steady over her console despite the tension in her shoulders. "Targeting solutions locked in for all ships. We'll only get one clean shot before they respond." The fleet moved silently toward the massive Zorgon station. Its twisted architecture resembled a massive metallic spider, with docking arms extending outward to house Zorgon vessels. Park had studied the design for weeks, looking for vulnerabilities. "Phase shift in 3, 2, 1. Mark," Park commanded. A strange vibration passed through the ship as the experimental technology activated. On the view screen, A shimmer passed over the hull, and then, to all appearances, the Resolve and its companion ships vanished from normal space. They were still there, but in a slightly shifted phase state, invisible to Zorgon sensors. 2 minutes 50 seconds remaining, Science Officer Yuna reported. The fleet glided into attack position, surrounding the station from multiple vectors. Park held his breath as they passed by a Zorgon patrol ship that showed no sign of detecting them. All ships in position, Kim announced. 2 minutes 10 seconds remaining on phase shift, Yuna added. Park took a deep breath. All ships, prepare to revert to normal phase on my mark. Weapons hot. Target their central power node. He paused. Then, for Earth. Fire all weapons. Now. The fleet shimmered back into normal space, and immediately a barrage of weapons fire erupted from every ship, converging on the station's center. Ji-Hai's fingers danced across her console, adjusting targeting parameters in real time. Targeting their central power node, Ji-Hai announced as the Resolve led the Resistance fleet in their first coordinated strike. The Zorgon station's shields flared brilliant green as they absorbed the first salvos, but the concentrated fire from 14 ships at point-blank range was too much. A section of shielding collapsed, and the next wave of weapons fire tore into the station's structure. Direct hit, Ji-Hai called out. Power fluctuations detected throughout the station. The victory was short-lived. Alarms blared as the Zorgon vessels docked at the station began powering up, their weapons systems coming online with frightening speed. Evasive maneuvers, Park ordered. All ships, execute attack pattern Delta. The battle was brutal. 2 human ships exploded in the first Zorgon counterattack. The remaining fleet scattered, drawing fire away from the Resolve as it continued its attack run on the station. Park gripped his chair as the ship shook under enemy fire. Shields at 60%, reported Engineer Lee from below decks. We can't take much more of this. We need 5 more seconds on target, Park said. Helm, give us those seconds. The Resolve rolled and twisted, avoiding the worst of the Zorgon fire while maintaining its attack on the station's power core. A final barrage of missiles broke through, and a massive explosion tore through the station's center. We've destabilized their main reactor, Ji-Hai called out. Station beginning to break apart. All ships, disengage and retreat to rally point, Park ordered. Data collection team, what's your status? Connection established, Tactical Officer Yumho Choi reported from the Auxiliary Science Station. Downloading their database now. The fleet pulled back as secondary explosions rippled through the Zorgon station. 3 more human ships were lost during the retreat, but the remaining vessels managed to escape to the predetermined rally point in a nearby asteroid field. Hours later, as the fleet licked its wounds, Tactical Officer Choi emerged from the data lab, his face ashen. He approached Park with a data tablet in his trembling hands. They're processing entire planets, whispered Choi as he analyzed the recovered data, horror evident in his eyes. The Zorgons, they're not just conquering, they're harvesting worlds for resources, breaking them down to their component elements. Park took the tablet, studying the schematics that showed massive Zorgon machines designed to literally tear apart planetary crusts and extract minerals. Earth wasn't just under occupation, it was being systematically dismantled. How long? Park asked, his voice hollow. At their current rate, Earth has less than 6 months before the process becomes irreversible. The gravity of this information settled over the bridge crew. Their victory at Proxima Station, bought with the lives of 5 ships and hundreds of crew, now seemed small against the scale of what they faced. Then we have 6 months to stop them, Park said, his voice finding new resolve. And now we know where to hit them next. The first blast caught everyone by surprise. Captain Jinho Park was studying the tactical display when the Resolve suddenly lurched sideways, throwing crew members across the bridge. Direct hit to starboard shields, cried Damage Control Officer Min. Shield effectiveness down by 40%. Park grabbed his console to steady himself. That's impossible. Their weapons shouldn't be able to penetrate our adaptive shielding. Another blast rocked the ship, more powerful than the first. Warning lights flashed across every station. "They've modified their energy signatures," reported Science Officer Yuna, her voice tight with shock. "The frequencies are shifting to match our shield vulnerabilities." The Resolve shuddered under direct hits from newly modified Zorgon weapons. The experimental warship that had survived countless engagements now found itself outmatched as 3 Zorgon cruisers closed in, their weapons precisely calibrated to the Resolve's weaknesses. "Evasive pattern gamma," Park ordered. "Engineering, reroute power to aft shields." The ship twisted in space, narrowly avoiding a third strike that would have disabled their engines. On the view screen, the Zorgon vessels moved with predatory precision, anticipating each maneuver. "They've studied our tactics," muttered Tactical Officer Choi. "They're adapting." Park scanned the nearby system, looking for options. There were no friendly vessels within range. The only potential refuge was a small, desolate moon orbiting a gas giant. "Helm, set course for that moon," Park ordered. "Full speed." As the Resolve accelerated toward the moon, the Zorgon ships pursued relentlessly. Another hit ravaged the ship's port side, causing a cascade of systems failures. "Engine efficiency dropping below 60%, reported Dr. Lee from engineering. "We're losing containment on the main drive." Park made the only decision he could. "Emergency landing procedures," he ordered as they limped toward the desolate moon. "All hands, prepare for atmospheric entry and ground operations." The descent was anything but smooth. The Resolve's damaged systems struggled to maintain control as the ship plunged through the moon's thin atmosphere. They hit the rocky surface with a bone-jarring impact that knocked out power to half the ship. "Damage report," Park demanded once the dust settled. "Main drive offline. Weapon systems at minimal capacity. Communications limited to short range only," listed Officer Min. "The good news is the hull integrity remains at 83%. We can make repairs." Park turned to Security Chief Sang-Min Kwan. "Chief, I need a perimeter established. Those Zorgon ships will be sending down landing parties." Kwan nodded grimly. "Already on it, sir. I've deployed teams to the high ridges surrounding our position." The moon's surface was harsh, jagged rock formations, deep ravines, and minimal gravity. The air was breathable but thin. As repair crews worked to restore the Resolve systems, Kwan organized the defense against Zorgon ground forces, using the harsh terrain to their advantage against technologically superior foes. "They're landing 3 kilometers north," reported a security officer over the comm. "I count at least 40 Zorgon troops." In the makeshift command center established outside the damaged ship, Kwan briefed his team leaders. "They'll expect us to stay close to the ship. Instead, we'll draw them into the ravines and target them from the high ground." The first encounter with Zorgon ground forces proved just how dangerous their enemy had become. The alien soldiers wore adaptive armor that changed color to match the surrounding terrain. Their weapons fired with deadly accuracy, forcing the human defenders to constantly shift positions. "They've analyzed our combat techniques," Kwan told Captain Park after the first skirmish left 3 crew members wounded. "They know to expect ambushes and flanking maneuvers." Park watched as Dr. Lee supervised repairs to the ship's drive system. "How long until we can lift off?" 18 hours minimum," Lee replied without looking up from his work, "assuming we aren't interrupted." They didn't have 18 hours. The Zorgon forces advanced methodically, testing the human defenses and adjusting their tactics with each engagement. By nightfall, they had pushed to within 1 kilometer of the ship. "We need to change our approach," Kwan said during an emergency meeting with Park and the senior officers. "They're anticipating our conventional tactics." Lieutenant Ji-hai suggested, "What if we stop thinking like military and start thinking like civilians? Do something completely unpredictable." The plan they devised was either brilliant or desperate. Using parts salvaged from damaged systems, Dr. Lee created devices that mimicked human life signs. These were scattered throughout the surrounding terrain, creating the impression of a force 3 times their actual size. Meanwhile, Quan led a small team through a nearly impassable ravine that circled behind the Zorgon position. Their mission: target the Zorgon command unit. Zorgons operate on a strict hierarchy, explained Officer Choi. If we eliminate their field commander, the rest will fall into disarray. The night was tense as the trap was set. The Zorgons advanced on what they believed was the main human position, only to find empty terrain and decoy signals. In the confusion, Quan's team struck from behind, targeting the Zorgon command vehicle with precisely placed explosives. The resulting chain reaction threw the alien forces into chaos. Without central coordination, the individual Zorgon units lost their tactical advantage, allowing the human defenders to pick them off one by one. By dawn, the immediate threat had been eliminated, and Dr. Lee's repair teams had restored enough functionality to the Resolve systems for an emergency takeoff. As the ship lifted shakily from the moon's surface, Captain Park stood on the bridge, watching the gas giant grow larger in the view screen. "They're learning," he said quietly to his officers. "They're studying us, adapting to our advantages." "And we're learning about them," replied Officer Choi. "Each encounter gives us more data." Park nodded thoughtfully. "We need to be more than just reactive. We need to understand them better than they understand us. And that would require their most dangerous mission yet." Captain Park held his breath as the Resolve approached the massive Zorgon checkpoint. The ship no longer looked like a human vessel. Its hull now bore the angular patterns and sickly green markings of a mid-tier Zorgon transport. This disguise, painstakingly crafted by Dr. Lee's engineering team, was about to face its ultimate test. "All systems running silent," whispered Communications Officer Kim, transmitting the identification codes we captured at Proxima. On the main view screen, 3 Zorgon warships loomed ahead, guarding the hyperspace gate that would take them directly into the heart of Zorgon-controlled space. No human had ever ventured this deep into enemy territory before. "Disguise protocols holding," reported pilot Du Yin Ryu as she guided the Resolve with steady hands. Her face showed intense concentration, matching the ship's movements precisely to Zorgon flight patterns they had studied for weeks. Long seconds passed as the Zorgon checkpoint scanned their vessel. The bridge crew remained perfectly still, as if even a small movement might give them away. "They're signaling," said Kim suddenly. "Standard authentication request." Park nodded to Tactical Officer Choi, who had spent months learning Zorgon communication protocols. Choi transmitted the prepared response, his fingers trembling slightly over the controls. Another tense pause, and then, "We're being cleared," Kim reported, disbelief in her voice. "They're opening the gate for us." The Resolve passed through the checkpoint and entered the hyperspace gate. A moment of disorientation followed, and then they emerged into a region of space no human eyes had ever seen. The central systems of the Zorgon Empire. "Full sensor sweep, passive mode only," Park ordered. "Record everything." The main view screen showed a stunning sight. Hundreds of Zorgon vessels moving in perfect formations around a massive central star. Orbital platforms larger than Earth cities extracted energy directly from the star's corona. And at the center of it all, a structure so vast it dwarfed everything else. A ring-shaped megastructure that Science Officer Yuna estimated was over 10,000 kilometers in diameter. "It's their central command," Yuna said softly. "The seat of their empire." For 3 days, the Resolve moved through Zorgon space under the perfect disguise. They observed fleet movements, communication patterns, and most importantly, the rigid hierarchy that governed all Zorgon activities. Each vessel, each installation had its exact place in a complex structure of authority. On the 4th day, they made their most important discovery. During a routine communication intercept, Officer Kim detected unusual patterns in the Zorgon transmissions. "These aren't just orders," she explained to Captain Park in his ready room. "There's something ritualistic about them. They repeat certain phrases at regular intervals, almost like prayers." Park studied the translated text carefully. "Religious elements." "I believe so," Kim nodded. references to something called the Great Cleansing and the Promised Ascension. Their invasion isn't just about resources, it's a religious crusade. They believe conquering and processing planets is a sacred duty. This revelation cast the entire conflict in a new light. The crew discovered the hierarchical nature of their enemy and the religious fanaticism driving their expansion. What they had thought was mere conquest was actually a holy war, with Earth and human colonies as sacrifices to Zorgon gods. On the sixth day, disaster struck. While the Resolve was holding position near a minor traffic hub, a Zorgon patrol vessel suddenly changed course and approached them. "They're hailing us directly," Kim reported, alarm clear in her voice. "Respond with standard acknowledgement," Park ordered. "Maintain disguise protocols." The Zorgon commander appeared on screen, its insectoid features unreadable. It spoke in the harsh, clicking language of its species, which the ship's computer struggled to translate. "Your energy signature shows anomalies." The translation came through. "Prepare for boarding and inspection." Park glanced at Ryu, their pilot. She gave a slight nod, their pre-arranged signal that she had plotted an escape route. "All hands, battle stations," Park ordered quietly. "Prepare to drop disguise on my mark." The moment the Zorgon vessel moved within 1,000 meters, Park gave the command. "Now." The Resolve's disguise systems deactivated as its weapons powered up. The first volley caught the Zorgon patrol completely by surprise, disabling its main propulsion. But the element of surprise wouldn't last long. "Multiple vessels changing course toward us," reported Tactical Officer Choi. "Our cover is blown." "Full power to engines," Park ordered. "Ryu, get us out of here." The Resolve accelerated away from the patrol, but more Zorgon ships were already moving to intercept. Ahead lay a dense asteroid field that the ship's computer labeled as navigational hazard, extreme danger. "That's our only way out," Ryu said, her hands already adjusting the flight controls. "I can do it." Park hesitated for only a moment. "Take us in." What followed was a display of piloting skill that would become legendary in the human resistance. Ryu executed an impossible maneuver through the dense asteroid field, her hands moving across the controls with almost supernatural precision. The Resolve twisted and turned through gaps barely wider than the ship itself, while behind them, Zorgon pursuers crashed into asteroids or were forced to take longer routes. When they finally emerged on the other side, only one Zorgon ship was still in pursuit. A final burst of the Resolve's engines, followed by a perfectly timed jump to faster-than-light travel, secured their narrow escape. Hours later, as the ship raced back toward human-controlled space, the crew gathered to analyze the enormous amount of data they had collected. "We know how they think now," Park told his officers. "We know what drives them. And for the first time, we know how to hurt them." The jungle air was thick and hot, filled with strange scents that the Resolve's crew had never experienced before. Massive trees towered overhead, their blue-green leaves filtering the strong sunlight of Caraxes, a world that had fallen to the Zorgons 5 years earlier. Captain Park led a small landing party through the dense undergrowth, following coordinates provided by intercepted Zorgon communications. "Movement ahead," whispered Security Chief Quan, raising his hand to halt the group. Park signaled for everyone to take cover. Through the dense foliage, shapes moved with surprising grace. Tall, slender figures with iridescent skin that shifted colors to match their surroundings. The native Caraxians. "We're here to talk," Park called out in a clear voice. "We share an enemy." For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then, the jungle seemed to come alive as dozens of Caraxians emerged from perfect camouflage. Their leader stepped forward, nearly 2 meters tall with 4 arms and eyes that reflected light like polished metal. "Humans," the Caraxian leader said in surprisingly good Earth standard. "We thought your kind was extinct." "Not yet," Park replied. "And we don't plan to be." The Caraxian resistance base was hidden beneath the massive root system of what the natives called the ancestor trees. Inside, Park saw technology unlike anything humans had developed. organic computing systems, and weapons that seemed to be partly alive. On the jungle world of Caraxus, Captain Park extended a hand to the leader of the native resistance. "We have common cause," he stated simply. The Caraxian leader, who called himself Verex, studied Park with those reflective eyes. "The Zorgons came to our world promising trade and knowledge. Within a cycle, they had taken our cities and begun harvesting our planet. We fought back, but our technology was no match for theirs. Yet you've survived," Park observed. "Your resistance has kept fighting for 5 years, while we've barely managed months." Verex made a sound that might have been a laugh. "We understand our world better than they ever will. The jungle protects us, but understanding is not enough. We need the means to strike back." In the days that followed, an uneasy alliance formed. The Caraxians were distrustful of any off-worlders after their experience with the Zorgons, and many of the Resolve's crew were uncomfortable working with the alien species. Cultural misunderstandings led to frequent tension. Engineering specialist Su Bin Jiang worked alongside alien technicians to develop weapons targeting Zorgon command systems. The Caraxians' organic technology, which operated on principles entirely different from human engineering, initially frustrated Jiang. "I don't understand how this can possibly work," she complained to Captain Park after a particularly difficult session. "Their tech responds to thought patterns and emotional states. It's like trying to have a conversation with a machine." "Keep trying," Park encouraged. "Their resistance has lasted 5 years against the same enemy that nearly wiped us out in weeks. They know something we don't." The breakthrough came unexpectedly. While examining a damaged Zorgon communication device captured by the Caraxians, Jiang noticed how the alien technology reacted violently to certain frequencies generated by Caraxian biotech. "It's like an allergic reaction," she explained excitedly to Park and Verex. "The Zorgon systems have a fundamental incompatibility with your organic technology. If we could amplify this effect." Verex grasped the concept immediately. A weapon that doesn't destroy their ships, but renders their control systems useless. For 2 weeks, the human engineers and Caraxian biotechnicians worked together, combining their vastly different approaches to create something neither species could have developed alone. The result was a series of transmitters that could broadcast the disruptive frequencies over wide areas, potentially disabling Zorgon fleet coordination. Not everyone embraced the partnership. A group of Caraxian warriors openly questioned Verex's decision to work with humans, while some of the Resolve's crew expressed concerns about sharing technology with an alien species they barely understood. During a particularly heated planning session, one of Verex's lieutenants accused the humans of planning to abandon Caraxus once they had what they needed. In response, several crew members demanded the Caraxians prove their commitment before any joint operation. Park listened to the growing argument before slamming his hand down on the planning table, silencing the room. "Either we stand together," Park told his uncertain crew, "or we all fall separately." He turned to address both groups. "The Zorgons don't see humans or Caraxians. They see resources to be harvested. They've done this to countless worlds before ours, and they'll do it to countless more if we don't stop them. Our differences mean nothing compared to what we both stand to lose." Verex stepped forward to stand beside Park. "The human speaks truth. My people have fought alone for too long. If there is a chance to free our world by joining forces, we must take it." The alliance solidified around a daring plan. Intelligence gathered by the Caraxian resistance indicated that a Zorgon command carrier would soon enter orbit to coordinate the next phase of planetary extraction. If they could disable it using their new technology, it would create a window of opportunity to attack the main Zorgon processing facility on the planet's surface. The plan required perfect coordination between the Resolve in orbit and the combined human-Caraxian strike force on the ground. It would stretch their resources to the limit and rely on technology that was still largely experimental. On the eve of the operation, Park stood at the edge of the resistance base, looking up through gaps in the canopy of the stars above. Verex approached silently, his skin shifting to match the night shadows. "Your crew is ready," Varek said, "They have learned our ways quickly." "As have your people adapted to our methods," Park replied. Varek was quiet for a moment. "If we succeed tomorrow, this will be just the beginning. There are other species, other worlds under Zorgon control, other potential allies." Park nodded, the idea taking root in his mind. Not just a human resistance, but a coalition of all those who had suffered under Zorgon rule. "One battle at a time," he said. "But yes, if we succeed here, this alliance may be the template for something much larger." As dawn approached, humans and corrections made final preparations side by side, two species united by necessity and the hope of freedom. The combined fleet moved through space with grim determination. 8 human vessels, including the battle-scarred Resolve, flew alongside ships of 5 different alien species, all victims of Zorgon expansion, all now united in desperate alliance. At the center of the Zorgon formation ahead loomed their massive command ship, the Dominion, nearly 10 times the size of any vessel in the Resistance fleet. Captain Jinho Park stood on the Resolve's bridge, studying the tactical display. Everything they had fought for over the past year had led to this moment. The intelligence gathered on their infiltration mission, the technology developed with the corrections, the alliances forged with other subjugated species, all of it focused on this single, almost impossible strike. "All ships report ready, Captain," said Communications Officer Hae-Hyun Kim. Her voice was steady, though Park noted the tension in her shoulders. "The disruptor technology is at full capacity," added engineering specialist Su Bin-jang. "But we'll only get one chance at this. Once they adapt, it won't work again." Park nodded. "Then we make it count." He opened a channel to the fleet. "All vessels, commence attack pattern Omega. Remember your assignments. The Resolve will create the opening. The rest of you know what to do." The Resistance fleet accelerated toward the Zorgon formation. For several crucial seconds, the enemy showed no reaction, their systems temporarily confused by the disruptor technology broadcasting from the Allied ships. Then, as expected, the Zorgons began to respond, their weapons powering up as they moved to intercept. "They're adapting faster than we anticipated," Tactical Officer Choi warned. "Disruptor effectiveness dropping." "Press the attack," Park ordered. "All ships, concentrate fire on the designated sectors." The Resolve led the final assault, diving straight toward the Dominion while the rest of the fleet engaged the escort vessels. Zorgon weapons fire slammed into the ship's shields, overwhelming them in several sections. "Hull breach on Deck 4, reported Damage Control. Emergency force fields holding." The ship shuddered violently as another hit struck near the bridge. A console exploded, sending an officer flying across the deck. Medical teams rushed to assist as Park held tightly to his command chair. "Distance to target," he demanded. 2,000 meters in closing, replied Pilot Ryu, her hands dancing across the controls as she evaded the worst of the enemy fire. "Docking will be possible in 30 seconds, if we survive that long." Taking devastating damage as it created an opening, the Resolve somehow pushed through the Zorgon defenses. Behind them, the Allied fleet had engaged the enemy escorts, drawing fire away from the flagship's desperate run. "Prepare the boarding team," Park ordered, rising from his chair. "Jahai, you have the bridge." Weapons specialist Ji-Hai Kang looked up in surprise. "Sir, you can't mean to lead the boarding party yourself." "That's exactly what I mean," Park replied, checking his sidearm. "This is too important to delegate." Minutes later, Park led a mixed team of humans and allies through the emergency airlock and onto the hull of the Dominion. Using breaching charges developed by the corrections, they cut their way into the massive vessel. Inside, they faced fierce resistance as Zorgon security forces converged on the intrusion. "Push forward," Park shouted over the sound of weapons fire. "We need to reach the central chamber." The strike team fought their way through the labyrinthine corridors of the Zorgon flagship, using the ship schematics they had stolen during their infiltration mission months earlier. Security Chief Quan took point, his tactical experience proving invaluable as they encountered multiple defensive positions. The Hierarch's chamber should be just ahead, Quan reported as they reached a massive doorway guarded by elite Zorgon warriors. The final push was brutal. 3 team members fell to Zorgon fire before they could secure the entrance. Using a combination of Caraxian bioexplosives and human tactical positioning, they finally breached the inner sanctum of Zorgon leadership. Inside the vast chamber, 3 Zorgon hierarchs, larger than any they had seen before, awaited with surprising calm. Behind them, a massive display showed images that took Park a moment to comprehend. A star system with a dying sun, planets breaking apart, and billions of Zorgon ships evacuating massive populations. "You have fought well to reach this place," said the central hierarch in perfect Earth standard. "But you cannot stop what has already been set in motion." Park kept his weapon trained on the hierarch, but his eyes were drawn to the display. "What is this?" he demanded. "The reason for everything," replied the hierarch. "Our home system is dying. Our sun entered its final phase centuries ago. We have been searching for suitable worlds to relocate our species. By destroying ours." Park's voice was tight with anger. "Conversion, not destruction," corrected the hierarch. "Your worlds are remade to support Zorgon life. It is regrettable but necessary for our survival." In the hierarch's chamber, they discovered the truth. The invasion was driven by desperation as the Zorgon homeworld faced annihilation. The images showed billions of Zorgons still waiting to be evacuated, their survival dependent on finding and converting suitable worlds. Park's mind raced. Everything they had fought against, every atrocity committed by the Zorgons, had been driven not by malice but by desperate survival. It didn't excuse their actions, but it explained them. Behind him, he could hear the sounds of battle throughout the ship. On his communicator, reports came in of heavy losses across the Resistance fleet. They might win this battle, might even kill these hierarchs, but the Zorgon species would keep coming, driven by the most powerful motivation of all, survival. Park looked at the dying Zorgon system again, then made a decision that would change the course of the war. He lowered his weapon. "There may be another way," Park said, surprising both his team and the hierarchs. "A way that doesn't require either of our species to be destroyed." "Explain," demanded the hierarch. "Your technology can reshape worlds, but you're doing it too quickly, destroying all existing life in the process." Park said, "What if we worked together? Used your world-shaping technology more gradually, created shared worlds where both our species could live." The hierarch studied him with alien eyes. "You would propose cooperation after all we have done." "I propose survival, for both our peoples," Park replied firmly. "Better than mutual destruction." For a long moment, the chamber was silent. Then the central hierarch made a gesture that caused the others to step back. "Your proposal has merit," the hierarch said finally. "It would require significant changes to our plans. And significant reparations for the worlds you've already damaged," Park added. As Park negotiated the first tentative terms of what would become a historic peace agreement, the battle outside slowly ceased. Word spread through both fleets of the unexpected turn of events. Many, particularly those who had lost homes and loved ones to the Zorgon advance, were outraged at the idea of peace. Later, as Park returned to the badly damaged Resolve, he faced his own crew's mixed reactions. "How can we trust them?" demanded Officer Choi. "After everything they've done." "We don't trust them," Park replied. "Not yet, but we've seen their motivation now. And they've seen that we're willing to fight to the last ship rather than be exterminated." As the battered Resistance fleet limped away from the encounter, Park stood at the viewport watching the massive Zorgon ships that now kept a respectful distance. The path ahead would be difficult. Explaining this decision to the remaining human colonies, convincing the other allied species to accept the peace terms, ensuring the Zorgons kept their word. But for the first time since the invasion began, there was hope for a tomorrow that didn't end in extinction for either side.